The youngest member of the executive of the United Progressive Party, the country's main opposition, is joining us in studio. And I'm particularly happy to have him in studio because my first impressions on him, I believe he may have served on a panel with me on ABS.
Yes, an election night.
Election night.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And suffice to say, I was sufficiently impressed. I was sufficiently impressed. I was tempted to say certain things, but I didn't want to doom his political career early. So anyway, he's still in his early 20s. He brings a younger perspective to our discussion this morning, and also the perspective of the political opposition, and of course, perhaps a future politician himself. Would you consider yourself a politician, Mr. Wehner? Good morning.
Good morning, Darren.
Welcome to Wake Up Call.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you. Good morning to your listeners and your viewers as well. I don't want to get too much in the future because there's a lot of things going on right now.
Yeah.
That we need to focus on.
Got you. So, yes. Smart answer. See, this is why you're here. Anyway, speak to us about the issues that you think are at the heart of the problem. And by the problem we've been discussing, we discussed with Arvel Grant, the situation involving particularly youth, crime, violence, abuse against our women and girls, etc.
Yes, thank you so much again for having me here, Darren. I want to start off by saying I know a lot of people, once they hear my name, once they hear my position, they have a certain mindset as to how I will think and how I will speak and represent. But I want to make it very clear that crime is not in and of itself a political issue. It's not a partisan issue, I should say. It's a universal issue that affects everyone. So we all want to see the government get it right when it pertains to crime. Nobody wants to see the government failing with crime because from my personal experience, I know several people whose houses have been robbed, broken into, and that's not in the news because, privacy. I know one of my schoolmates was found to be murdered this year. Yeah, somebody I went to school with, yes. I know several people who have gone through some seriously challenging times in the last 2 years, this last year, when it comes to crime, Darren, whether it be rape, whether it be murder, whether it be robberies, whether it be houses being broken into. So I could not come here and for 1 second find any joy or do any political grandstanding because the government, some people would say, is failing when it comes to crime. We want to see them get it right, not just for my benefit or it's for the benefit of Antigua and Barbuda and for our youth. And it's very sad, Darren, for me to see even the increase in youth crime and youth violence, whether it be the youth participating in the crime and violence or that violence being meted out to young people. So it's a very sobering time in our nation. Yes, everybody has to make their points. We have to do our job because as the opposition party, we have to. It's our job to pull up where the government can do better.
Right.
But at the same time, I will say where I think the government has done well. So, for example, we all know to produce productive members of our society, we have to train our young people, whether it be in the social, with social etiquette, or whether it be through education, academics. You have to big up the government by bringing the Five Islands, the UE campus to Antigua.
Right.
That's a very good opportunity for young people to go and educate themselves. Applaud you for that. Yes, there might have been some disagreements as to where the campus is located, but that's neither here nor there for me right now. I'm just happy that young people have another opportunity to go and better themselves. Having said that, I want the public to realize I'm not just saying things just for saying things' sake. So by setting that premise, let me get into it. Darren, I hear a lot of things about how we need to address this crime, shipping people back home as cargo, the police fighting back, fire with fire. I understand those things. We're in the moment now. We will be emotional. But sometimes cooler heads need to prevail. There's a short-term response and there's a long-term response. The short-term might tell you, the police fire back at the criminals, kill them, wherever. But there will always be more criminals. The solution never will be to shoot and kill criminals. That's not the long-term solution. The long-term solution is, what are we doing for at-risk youth in our country who are likely to fall into that life of crime? Not because, just show it. Everybody has individual responsibility for your actions, Darren. That's undeniable. There are consequences for your actions, so there must be punishment. Yes, we understand that. But what are we doing as a society? First, at the family level. First, at the school level or the church level, whatever moral institutions you have. So the family and the schools or churches, and then at the government level. But as a member representing the UPP this morning, I will focus more on the government level, and perhaps you can come back later to talk about the other two levels. But what are we doing for our at-risk youth in our nation to do our best to lead them away from that path of crime, from that path of violence, from that gang involvement, those criminal elements? So I want to get to it. What is our government doing? What is our government doing, and can we do more? Number one, the Ombudsman in her latest report, Dr. Marion Blair, it's a very damning report of the government. It's a very scathing report of the government, unfortunately. Unfortunately, Darren. I'm not saying that with a smile on my face. I know some people can't see, but unfortunately it is. Because this directly affects young people. For example, the boys' training school. The boys' training school, Darren, has been closed since 2018, as reported by our Ombudsman. The boys' training school, along with the Sunshine Home for Girls, are the two, I'm not sure if there are others, but I know those are the two main institutions to help to rehabilitate young people who make wrong decisions. We can't throw them away for the rest of their lives, or just keep them in jail for 10, 15 years and expect them to come out and just be productive members in our society. So we need those institutions to rehabilitate, and so that when those young people are reintroduced in society, they can be productive members. That boys' training school has been closed since 2018. Fair enough, it's closed. You came into government in 2014, Gaston Broad administration, the Honorable Gaston Broad administration. You would have known that the training school doesn't need to be closed. What measures were put in place to ensure another facility was made available, separate from the prison, Darren, and I'll get to that, to house these young people in the meantime while the renovations are being done to the boys' training school. And again, public listeners, it is important for these facilities to be open, to be operational, and to be effective in their performance of their duties, because these are the institutions that get to the root causes of the problems we're now facing today. So 6 years of inadequacy has contributed to the results we see today. So the boys' training school needs to be open. The programs and activities that are being done there need to be supported financially, because money talks, money gets things done. And what has been done with those juvenile offenders that are supposed to be held at the boys' training school? They have been housed, according to our Ombudsman, in her report for the years 2022 and 2023. That's her latest report. I'm going to read it now. For 5 long years, these juvenile offenders have been incarcerated at the maximum security block in Her Majesty's prison. When the Ombudsman visited the jail in October 2023, they were distributed between the maximum security and Steel City, that is the containerized cells. The Ombudsman spoke with a 13-year-old, 2 14-year-olds, a 15-year-old, and a 16-year-old housed in the containerized cells. They were not attending school, and no teacher visited them, no teacher. Their formal education was on hold. Instead, they were attending informal classes in the yard, being tutored by, listeners listen to this, being tutored by adult offenders who were supposedly, and she has in quotation marks, trusted and or working inmates. Now pause there, Darren. I want to pause right there. There's several things wrong with that. One, the Child Justice Act of 2015 mandates the minister to ensure that there's a separate facility to house juvenile offenders apart from the prison.
And by the minister, you're referring to the Minister of Public Safety?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes. Also, on top of that, aside from that being a violation of the Child Justice Act of 2015, we know in Antigua and Barbuda, everybody knows this. Once you're under the age of 16, it is your right to an education. Your right.
Yes.
You are supposed to be provided with a formal education. That's number 2. Number 3, what do we expect to happen to our youth, Darren? To our youth, because it could be me. It's by the grace of God. I'm a religious person, Darren, so I know everybody's not religious, but by the grace of God, Darren, I'm sitting here talking to you, and I'm not at boys' training school or Her Majesty's prison. I know people personally who have made wrong choices in their life and who are in unfortunate circumstances.
Aside from the fact that your parents will probably kill you. But I take your point. I say that in jest. You carry on.
I'm just saying, it's with the grace of God that I'm sitting here, Darren, and I'm not anywhere else.
Right.
So these young people who have made bad choices, and it's for various number of reasons why they end up in these facilities, the intensity or the degree of their offenses varies, So we have to look after them. So when we're hearing that they're being tutored by adult offenders, these same offenders who, Darren, are murderers, who are rapists. We just heard in the news a couple of weeks ago that an individual was sentenced to prison because he raped his daughter. So we have pedophiles in our prison. We have molesters. We're literally giving lambs to lions. When he housed these juvenile offenders, the ombudsman, nobody here that the ombudsman saw is under 16 years of age. Right. And we're putting them in the hands of our adult offenders. What kind of young people are we preparing to go back out into our society? Reasonably, yes, as I said before, we all have to hold individual responsibility for our actions. But what are we at the different levels in our society, whether it be the family, the schools or the church, and the government, doing to ensure our at-risk youth will become productive?
All right. I was very generous with letting you, introduce yourself to our listeners. This is your first time on Wake Up Call, and you're making some very, some very valid points. What I'm going to do now, we need to share. We have to take care of our business. Yes. So we'll do that, and we'll continue. I do have some questions for you. We do have time, though. Mr. Wehner, This is a really difficult situation that we're finding ourselves in. Outside of the response to our first question, as it relates to the issues surrounding or what's at the heart of our crime, what do you make of the government's response so far? More resources for the police, $15 million, I think, is going to be made available for enhancing the security posture for the country. A special anti-gang unit, promises of anti-gang legislation, the curfew, we discussed that earlier with Arvel Grant, a pledge to increase sentencing severity, discussing bail practices with the judiciary. So it's quite a wide range of approaches the Prime Minister is suggesting to deal with these situations. What do you make of this?
I mean, really and truly, I welcome all these things. It's better late than never. But as I said, the root issues need to be addressed. And I want to get back to those root issues later in our conversation. But let me say something. In his response letter, I should say, the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Jamal Pringle, asked a few questions, apart from the Batman thing. But, we tend to focus on the sensational. Right. But in his letter as well, too, he said, where is the forensic lab that was promised to help to solve crime? If the public casts its minds back, the Attorney General, who is the Minister for Public Safety as well, too, would have promised that a forensic lab, I can't remember if he said in a few weeks, this was months ago now, would have been completed. Yeah. And if you realize we still have to send overseas, I think it's to Barbados, for...
Sometimes the FBI lab in the States.
Yes, for DNA results to be tested and things of that nature. And people wait for months and months and months. And really and truly, this is not an efficient way to fight crime. So where was that promise? How is it being fulfilled? The agent needs to come out to the public and update us on that again. And another issue is where were the breathalyzers that he promised as well too? This is also in the Leader of Opposition's letter response, because there are promises made in the past by the government. Because if the public remembers, in 2022, there was a serious uptick in crime and increased rates of youth violence specifically. And I remember this because as a member of the National Youth Parliament Association, we went and had a bunch of initiatives to sensitize the public about youth violence and what's going on, and propose solutions. We even debated a resolution in Youth Parliament about this youth violence in 2022, Darren. Yeah. Now, for this to be coming back again at a worse level. Now, there was alarm in 2022. I want to read from the World Population Review, a table that ranks the countries by murder rate. So per 100,000 people, how many murders you have per 100,000. Right. For reference, the Jamaica that we all say it's a very bad situation has 53.3 murders per 100,000. Mm-hmm. Barbados, 15.27 per 100,000. Antigua and Barbuda, 10.67 per 100,000. And the United States of America, 6.38 per 100,000. So in 2022, when we're crying out that this was such a serious situation that we need to address this crisis. And now in 2024, for the whole year in 2022, it was 10.67. In 2024, we're already at 10, and we're in August. We have quite a few more months to go. So it's a very serious situation that the government needs to not just say, we're going to pump money into here, we're going to put money into there, and then there's no follow-up, as with the forensic lab, as with the breathalyzers, and so many other promises. For example...
one listener says the prison. The AG promised about a new prison.
A new prison.
Yeah.
And I think they were saying they were locating some plot or something, and all kind of stories. On top of these promises made and promises not kept, in 2019, in the budget summary that the government prepares, not the opposition, not any civic organization, the government, with the help of their civil servants, on page 395, which is available online on the 2019 budget, the Family and Social Services Division, under the accomplishments, the Family and Social Services Division was able to renovate and retrofit the facilities of the Boys Training School with donor support of US $120,000 from USAID and OECS. Also, tangible resources such as office equipment and educational tools were procured to support program implementation. Now, Darren, it is very troubling for me that we in a nation such as Antigua and Barbuda can sit back and have these things available to us and not be pressuring the government for transparency and accountability. You spend money, you're promising more money again, but your track record shows that you said you did things with money and it's not where you said it went. Because where's the US $120,000 that you said you were boasted about completing the renovation of the Boys Training School? Why is it still closed 2019, 5 years later? It's still closed five years later. Where did that money go into? Why is the place still closed after you boasted you completed this? I know this is a different minister. That would have been Samantha, the Honorable, she's still the Senator, the Honorable Samantha Marshall. Then we have Sir Marwin Joseph now. But I think Senator Marshall still is a Minister of State within Sir Marwin's ministry.
Right.
Yeah, from the Senate.
Right.
I believe she is.
Right.
Yeah, but however, there needs to be transparency and accountability, and that is why the Public Accounts Committee needs to be supplied with the relevant information it needs to hold the government accountable. We can't just keep having promises. The Prime Minister can come and make an address every week, every month, every year. But if we don't have any books, we don't keep the ledgers before us with transparency for us, the public, because the UPP alone cannot hold the government accountable. We need the support of the public. We need the support of civic organizations, because the Gaston Brown administration will continue to just disrespect and dismiss. Yeah. Because, for example, the leader of the opposition, on behalf of all of his parliamentary candidates, MPs, wrote letters to the Commissioner of Police suggesting to assist the Commissioner with the public comments, and so I see you need to take a break.
Yeah, because it's actually time for the news.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's actually time for the news. Hold that thought. We're continuing our discussion with Jonathan Wehner, executive member of the United Progressive Party. I think he said you're the youngest executive member.
Yes, I am.
All right. That comes with its own set of pressures, I'm sure. But anyway, we'll talk about that some other time. We were speaking about reaction to the Prime Minister's address, and you were, offering a response. Is there anything incorporated in your response generally to what the Prime Minister had to say? Is there anything that needs to be done that you're thinking is not being done?
It's a very good point. So, Darren, basically what I was saying before we took the break, good morning again to you, Darren, and to your listeners and viewers. But what I was saying before the break is that...
We know you have manners. Is that right? Continue.
Yes. Thank you. The Prime Minister made some promises in his speech the other night, and also I'm hearing in the cabinet notes as well too. However, as I pointed out in the past, promises were made which were not kept, i.e. the forensic lab, which was promised by the Minister for Public Safety, also the breathalyzers for the police force, also the completion of the Boys Training School after money was donated to them, to the government I'm speaking about. The Boys Training School is still closed. The youngsters are still being housed at Her Majesty's Prison. And the point that I wanted to read off, because I did say it's a violation of the Child Justice Act of 2015, but I don't want people to take my word for it. I'm reading now. All of this, folks, you can find online. We live in the age of the internet, so very easily accessible. The Child Justice Act of 2015, Part 4, entitled Establishment of Assessment Facilities and Secure Residential Facilities. This is bullet point number 10 under that.
Right.
Secure residential facility. The minister shall, not me, if he feels like or whatever, the minister shall establish and maintain, either by his ministry or pursuant to an agreement with a voluntary organization, a secure residential facility as may be required for the reception and rehabilitation of a child who has been sentenced in accordance with this act. So it is mandated by law for a separate facility to be in existence and to be maintained. So that's in a violation.
Right.
But that's the point I was making, that promises were made before, promises were not kept. I hope for the benefit of all of us, as I've expressed earlier in this program, I personally know of an individual who was found to be murdered. I know people whose houses have been broken into. I know personally people who have been held up at gunpoint. This crime situation is a universal issue. It is not a partisan issue that only affects blue, red, orange, yellow, whatever you may be. It affects all of us. So we want to see the government get it right. And the Honorable Gaston Brown needs to realize, I hope he will, the Minister for Public Safety also needs to realize, and the Commissioner of Police also needs to realize, they are not blameless in this entire circumstance we find ourselves in. All right? Also, we cannot just use fiery rhetoric to hopefully quell the emotions of the public at the time and think that will be sufficient. It is not sufficient, because the inadequacies, as I said before, of the past years where we're not fulfilling our duty to our at-risk youth in particular. Because I want to get to this, Darren. The CXC results came out yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Day before.
Within the last 2 days, so the day before yesterday.
Right.
And we see in our CXC results regionally, so I'm not just castigating our local Ministry of Education, but regionally, the pass rate for math is at a low, a ridiculous low. I think it's 30-something or 20-something percent.
30-odd%.
I don't have the figures before me, unfortunately, but it's in the low percentile.
Right.
Not even 50% of our youth are passing maths at the CSEC level. What do we expect to happen to those youth when they go out to look for a job? What kind of jobs can they get? They're more likely to succumb to the temptations, to the influences of gang leaders, of negative influences in their lives, when they tell them, come in with me, and I look at me, I have so much money, I live in this kind of lifestyle, I cool like this, I whatever. You're more likely to go down that path if you are not set up with the right tools and equipment that you need to go out to be productive members in our society. And yes, I keep saying we all have an individual responsibility, because we live in a free society. We live in a capitalistic society. We live in a democratic society. So individual responsibility lies within everyone. However, at the family level, at the school and moral institutional level, and at the government level, all three levels of our society need to play their part, support all of us to ensure that we contribute to this country. So the schools themselves, the secondary schools, what are we doing to ensure the teachers are well trained? The teachers have the proper equipment. So, Darren, it's really frustrating, because this is a culmination of years of failures that we're seeing at the government level and other levels as well. But I'm here as a representative of the political party. I will focus on the government level. We can come back at a later time.
That's understandable.
Let me just make this one. At the government level, yes, we talk about the e-books. People think they're beating the horse to death. But those young people who do not have the proper textbooks to study for an exam, Darren. I can't imagine going up for a CSEC exam. I can't either afford the textbooks. Thankfully, we have textbooks given to us, or the textbooks in poor condition. Even when the ebooks were dumped at Cook's Dump, the video was taken, Darren, and we saw math textbooks and CDs at the Cook's Dump. If you say they're out of date, the syllabus for CSEC might change, and Darren, I know. I would know. The syllabus for CSEC might change, but the principles and the different values of math, they don't change themselves. Math is constant. Math is not disproven or whatever it is. Math is there, so we can use those same books, those same CDs for practice for our youth. Math needs to be done. This approach to mathematics performance at CSEC needs to be really looked at and needs to be addressed, because we're not setting up our youth to be productive members in our society. The e-books fail us. The government institutions, whether it be the secondary schools, are failing us. Look at the Bolans well, not the Bowlands, the St. Mary's South constituency during the by-election. So many promises were made, Darren. So many. All down to AC units being installed in schools. So many things are going to be done. Up to now, Darren, the minister came out, I believe, or was it the Ambassador Lionel Maxwell came out and said, we're not just going to stick it to St. Mary's South, but national, we're going to look across the different secondary schools and see which ones are the hottest and so forth, and we're going to put different AC units and all. What has been done? School is going to open in a couple of days now, not even weeks, days. What is the progress on those things? Promises in the past, as I keep saying, there's a track record of promises made and promises not kept that have led us to the current situation that we see today.
We say the youth are our future. We've continued our focus on youth. Yet there are a few young people, particularly young males, who seem to have no future but delinquency and deviance. At least that is how it appears to be. And you spoke to that just moments ago. Speak to us about the challenges that we're having with some of our young men. I imagine that, you're a card-carrying member of the Young Men's Club. You are obviously choosing a different path. But you say I'm imagining you have friends, you have associates, you're on social media, you have a sense of what's going on the ground. What are the challenges our young men are having?
Darren, it's a
where to start?
It's a for me, and I want to preface this by saying I have my certain biases. It's not just a political bias. I have religious and cultural biases. So everyone will not agree, I must say, and understandably, we all have our rights to disagree with my...
And we all have our biases.
Exactly, with my diagnosis of the situation. But for me personally, there has been a dramatic change in the cultural norms and practices in Antigua and Barbuda within the last 20-25 years. Before time... before I sound like an old person, I'm not going to say in the good old days. Not going to say that. But in times past, Darren, young people, you used to take them to church. You had to be in Sunday school on a Sunday morning. You had to go to certain extracurricular activities and certain volunteer groups, whether it be Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, whatever it may be. Young parents made sure their youth were involved in different activities, in moral institutions, as I said. And also they looked out for their children in school. So I know, Darren, I'm sure your parents ensure Darren, come on, man, you had to do this in school and whatever. Right. Get through school, get through high school, whatever it may be, whatever vision they had for you. But that same effort, care and attention is not being placed into our young people today. Now, this is more of a cultural thing. The absentee father issue is a big issue because parents have to be present in their children's lives. The greatest enemy of a family is absence. Is the absence of parents and the absence of values. Now, if you have an absence of parents, it's very difficult to get the values. You can still get the values from grandparents, guardians, and other
auntie, godparents.
Yes, other people in your life who you look up to, figures. Right. However, parents are the ones who are supposed to impart those moral values. Parents are the ones who are supposed to uphold our cultural norms. Parents are the ones who are the guardians, the preservers of not just the youth, but the cultural identity of Antigua and Barbuda. So when Darren Matthew Ward looks back to his days as a youth, not necessarily the technology and certain things that were wrong in the country, but the cultural principles, the things that made Antigua and Barbuda distinct as a nation, is preserved as we go from generation to generation to generation. And we must say that has not been done. So parents have been absent physically as providers, physical providers, and also absent as teachers in terms of imparting good cultural values. On top of that, Darren, we also see that, how do I put this in the best way possible? For me, I just don't. I'm not a perfect individual, first and foremost. By no means am I perfect. But I think whether it be the church or other such more like institutions, the influence has really waned in the lives of young people. So yes, we're not going to church. Yes, we're not going to extracurricular activities. Yes, the sports is still very much present. Yes. But who are the figures in your life when let's say the parents are absent? Who are the figures in your life upholding those values, holding you to a higher standard? It's now those gang leaders. It's now those friends who are pressuring you. It's now the social media, the phones. I'm not saying phones is a bad thing. I have a phone. Come on now. Social media is not a bad thing inherently in and of itself. It's how we use these things. We ought to use these things to be more productive. Young people, we can relax. Yeah. But this age of bullying and this, even our music that we listen to, we enjoy it. We all enjoy it. But if all our music is about that young people listen to is about sex, drugs, violence, I mean, what do we expect to happen? That's what they listen to all the time.
Right.
So we have to make sure that what our young people are taking in, we have to guard what they're taking in, because they're youth, they're minors. It's our responsibility, those of us who have...
But, you know, Jonathan, I want to press you on this.
Yeah.
We have, I don't know what our ratio is from boys to girls. I guess when we complete the census exercise, if it gets completed soon,
That's a good point.
we will have an idea. We will have an idea. But young girls are brought up in homes without fathers.
Yes.
And in homes where mothers are more interested in living their best life than being mothers, which is what the point you're making just now, right? Is that a fair characterization of what you were just saying?
Yes.
But the young girls don't appear to be engaged in deviant activity and deviant behavior and criminal activity as much as the young men. So what is it that is going so wrong with our men? That really is the issue. And of course, you juxtapose that against looking at the university graduate numbers. The ratio of female to male is usually lopsided and in favor of the females. Same thing with CXC results. Generally, although I think the last year's top student was from Academy, if I'm not mistaken. But generally, in terms of the top performers, they're generally female. What going on with our young men? That's what I want to press you on.
Darren, answer this. Guys, I'm sure most of us as men, we can identify with it. We tend to be more wild.
Right.
We tend to do more crazy things. We tend to do a lot more downright stupid things that we'd rather people not know about and we'd rather embarrass about in our youth.
Right.
So young men, I'm glad I'm a man, so I don't sound sexist saying this.
Right.
But we tend to gravitate to the more crazy, wild, and indulge ourselves in certain things. So knowing that as men we tend to do these things, we have to place extra care, extra attention as well to honor our men. Because we can see women tend to mature more quickly at a younger age than young guys do. So they tend to have their head on their shoulders relatively at an earlier age.
Focus more.
Able to focus
more. That's what I'm told. They focus better.
That's what some studies will tell you if you talk about the academic standpoint. But in our experience, that's what we tend to see. So knowing that, we have to place more attention on our young men.
Right.
I want to go back quickly and read an excerpt from the Ombudsman report from 2022-2023. That's her latest report. She says, speaking about the young men, watching the inmates, this is at Her Majesty's prison, who were already in the yard for lunch, the prison population seemed younger. What is happening to our young men? It is not enough to chuck a weed whacker into their hands and send them to cut grass. Why are the ministries of social transformation and education not transforming the lives of these young people through industrial programs, remedial programs, educational assistance, mentoring, counseling, and work? There needs to be a thorough investigation into youth affairs to identify the root causes behind these young men ending up behind bars. Sending them to jail in some circumstances may not be the answer. Now, I hear again, we're going back to the fiery rhetoric. It is needed in some circumstances, to some extent, from the Prime Minister. Yes, it is needed. But when I hear him saying that just throw them in jail, or send them back as cargo, or just fire with fire, that is not going to solve the problem. It might subside for short term, but it will always be a flare. We look at Jamaica and Trinidad, the police are fighting fire with fire there for years. Has the crime rate decreased? No, Darren.
A friend of mine from Jamaica made that very point yesterday. Yeah.
Fire with fire, throwing them in jail, sending people back as cargo, deporting people is not going to solve the root issue, because as we discussed, what is happening to our young men? As the Ombudsman said, what is happening to our young men? I keep saying, the family level, where there's the absence of parents, where there's the absence of values, there's going to be a problem.
So you agree with the Prime Minister on that point?
Of course.
He did say that.
Of course. The Prime Minister is not all wrong. He says points that are very much correct. He's very much correct in certain things. Okay. But we all hold responsibility. At the family level, at the school level, and this is where the government has a very heavy hand to play as well. Of course, individual responsibility, the choice of students plays a part. But are we providing them with the best environment possible? For example, the decriminalization of marijuana. That's a hot button issue.
That was actually the next question.
That was a hot button issue.
But tell you what, hold that point.
Okay. All
The
right.
tech is giving me the side eye. He needs to play some of our partners'
Yes,
messaging.
fair enough.
We'll continue on the other side right after this. We're continuing our discussion with the youngest member of the UPP executive, Mr. Jonathan Wehner. And you listen to him talk, you can understand why he's on the executive. Pretty sharp, young mind. I think I've said this already in the public domain, so it won't come as any surprise. And all my Labour Party friends will say whatever they have to say, and that's okay. We'll still remain friends because we're like that. But Mr. Wehner, you're going down the path of the impact of decriminalization. I have to use the correct term.
Yeah.
Decriminalization of small quantities of marijuana and the impact that has had on this entire picture that we're painting this morning.
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't have the bill before me that actually decriminalized the marijuana. Right. But from my recollection, it actually is illegal for young people to be smoking it at school, because if I remember it correctly, when it was passed, the purpose of it was for people to do it at home under a certain amount of grams. I think it's 15 grams and how many number of trees and so on and so forth. So there were certain restrictions placed upon it. But when we passed laws in our country, or in any country as a matter of fact, laws are as only good as how you enforce them. Really and truly. So you can have a law in the books, but if it's not enforced, or if it's not enforceable, what's the sense of the law existing? So when we look to pass laws or enact laws, we have to ensure that we have the necessary systems in place to bring about the desired outcome of the law that we're passing. So marijuana was decriminalized. We've seen after the decriminalization of marijuana, which I'm not, by the way, there are other people who are whatever. I'm not talking about the merits or the ills of decriminalizing it. I'm specifically speaking about the impact it has on young people, specifically those who attend in secondary school. That's what my focus is right now. So we've seen, since marijuana has been decriminalized, that there's been a serious increase of youth smoking marijuana at school. Now, clearly, it's very obvious that would have a negative impact on someone's education, whether it be the environment for those who are not smoking the weed, or the people who are smoking the weed themselves. That is not conducive.
Especially if their brains aren't fully developed.
Exactly.
That's what the medical experts tell me.
Well,
it's a problem.
Exactly, and I don't know how it affects you, because I haven't smoked it before, but I don't know how I could be high on marijuana and go into a class and try to learn about angles and circles or the principles of accounts and all them kind of things.
Integers
and things like that. Sets, and I don't know how I could do that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it's not conducive for a productive learning environment. So the government needs, and people have been crying about this for years, Darren. Years. It's not tomorrow, well, not yesterday, last week or last month. It's years now. Teachers, principals, parents, even some school children have been asking for action to be taken as it pertains to the serious increase of usage of marijuana at secondary schools in particular. And we have to say, not enough has been done to address the issue. I don't know if you might have a different point on that, but for me personally, I don't think enough has been done to ensure that the spirit of the law, the purpose for which the law was passed, is preserved, upheld, and maintained.
The police commissioner on this program 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, conceded that there is an issue with the enforcement angle of it. I mean, long and short of what he had to say was that they recognize there is a problem and it needs to be addressed, but it's an ongoing conversation. I don't know how much longer it's going to be ongoing, but I'm just paraphrasing what he said. But there was a concession on his part that yes, this is a problem. The police, perhaps, I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, essentially implying that they recognize there's a problem and that there needs to be a strategy to address the problem.
Yes.
All right. We hope to have him again soon to speak about all the current goings on, and I'll be sure to press him on that again.
Yes.
To see if that conversation has been moved any further along. I mean, the Security Cabinet would have met very recently. Now,
just before you go on from that,
yeah, sure.
I remember there was a committee or whatever you want to call, a board or whatever for marijuana looking to investigate the effects of it. I think it was headed up by Regis Burton.
I think so, yes.
And they had some different members of the civil society on it. We want to hear
What's going
updates,
on with
progress,
that?
especially in this time as, the increase in youth violence.
All right,
Yeah.
all right, great, good point, and I'll certainly put that question out there as well. Now, the vast majority of teenagers, including majority of young males, grow up to be more or less functioning members of society, who, despite their flaws, you mentioned that, will not be in gangs committing robberies and murder. But the minority who gets themselves involved and wielding cutlasses and one of the things that some listeners have made is that Antigua and Barbuda has become a very tense, very aggressive society. We're very aggressive with each other, right? A simple traffic misunderstanding, all sorts of colorful words have to fly. Everything is a problem. If I disagree with you politically, I go after you in ways that are, just unpleasant. To what extent do you think that toxic environment contributes to the way our young people are behaving?
Massively. Massively. The main issue here is not necessarily at the top level of being in the government. The root issue is the cultural change in Antigua and Barbuda. That's the root issue. So that's why I keep on saying fiery rhetoric can't go so far. But we need to address the root issue. And addressing the root issue, putting policies and programs in place, might not bring you results tomorrow, next week, or even next month. But for the long term, for the next 5-10 years in our nation, we need to be planning and thinking ahead. China does it all the time. China has 5-year plans, 10-year plans, and things. Big countries, America, England, so forth. We need to start to behave like a grown-up country. We have our independence for quite a while now, all right? We need to start to act like we drop our diapers and start walking on our own 2 feet. So real and true, the government, we need to, and even our society, need to realize the culture has changed because of the different factors, many different factors. Technology has brought in the, I don't say invasion, but the assimilation of other cultures into our society, especially the American culture. We see American movies, we listen to American music, we have American influences. For goodness sake, most of us are more aware about American politics than our own politics. So American culture really dominates us. And we know the impact that has. We know the issues America have with their culture. So knowing that, we have to have certain things in place to preserve our own distinct cultural identity. And is that being done to the level that it needs to be? No, because we see what's going on now. So yes, those influences are there. That's a massive problem. Our culture is changing. We need to fight to preserve our own culture. The peaceful society that we once had. Yes, there were murders. Yes, there were rapes. Yes, there was this. But not to the level that we have today.
One listener is saying that we've been a callous people for some time now, and they say that they're afraid of what's going on. The listener also is sharing with me, apparently the United Progressive Party is having an event tonight.
Yes.
A panel discussion on crime and violence.
So tonight at from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. down at Freedom Hall. And it will be live streamed on the My UPP Facebook page. That's MYUPP on Facebook. And it'll be brought over the radio stations as well, Progressive FM and Observer and so forth. Where the United Progressive Party with several, professional people, technical individuals within the sphere of public safety and addressing the crime issue. They were speaking about the Prime Minister's response and even proposing certain action that they think the government should take in the short term and even the long term. I don't want to say names now on the air because certain things just have to be finalized and confirmed, but it should be a very stellar lineup from the police aspects for those who are even retired and even from the legal side and so on. So it should be a very comprehensive discussion, a very productive discussion, and the party is not planning to stop at talk. So from what I know, we have certain things planned for next week and in the days coming ahead. So there will be action taken.
Here's a question. I think something like the above should be a joint effort by both parties. We must move away from the partisan approach to addressing the matter. It's not helping the situation. So they're thinking, this should be a collaborative effort between the UPP and the government, yes. Labour Party. How do you feel about that reaction from that listener?
I actually agree. I fully agree. And also, the leader of the opposition agrees with that listener. And I tell you the evidence of why they agree. If you go back to some newspapers a while ago, the leader of the opposition, as I mentioned earlier, wrote a letter dated the 3rd of July, 2024, where the leader of the opposition, on behalf of all his parliamentary colleagues, to include the MP from Barbuda, requested a sit-down with the Commissioner of Police And I wish I had a letter. I don't know if I can find it in time, but basically saying that those opposition MPs are willing to help to assist the commissioner and the police force by extension in terms of their public relations, to sensitize the public on the actions being done by the police force, to even give their contributions to maybe how you can improve or, tweak this here and there in your approach to the crime situation. Mm-hmm. So this was since July 3rd. Mm-hmm. The letter was not even acknowledged. Mm-hmm. As far as I know, the last time I spoke with a political leader, that would have been 2 nights ago or last night, that no receipt, no acknowledgement of receipt, and no effort was there to reach back to the opposition MPs. And I want to make this point, Darren.
Sure.
The effort was made to reach out to do a bipartisan approach to this crime thing. We're ignored, we're rebuffed. But you're not ignoring politicians. You're ignoring representatives of the people. You're ignoring thousands of people who voted for those MPs. And not only the people who voted for them, because they represent the constituency as a whole. All constituents within that constituency. So when I hear troubling comments when the Prime Minister gets up in Parliament and says, those constituencies that did not vote for Labour will be neglected and things of that nature, or you need to have a government minister to get issues addressed. That was a major talking point in the St. Mary's South by-election. That's how are you going to have an MP who is in opposition? Nothing is going to be done. But I'm saying, you are the government. We all pay taxes. So there needs to be a bipartisan approach to these kind of issues. So you ignoring the representatives of the people. Mm-hmm. It's a serious issue. But I hope things will change in this country.
Mm-hmm. You're hopeful that things will change. Are you optimistic, Jonathan?
Very much so. If you're not optimistic in your youth, when will you be? When will you be?
That's an excellent response. And let me tell you, it's really been a joy talking to you, Jonathan. And it's nice, great to have you on Wake Up Call. And hopefully we'll do this again sometime soon as things evolve. Certainly as far as this issue and other issues relating to youth and politics generally in the country. Thank you so much for being a part of our program this morning.
Thanks for having me, and good morning again to you and your listeners.
All right.